Okay, so I've started recording, and today, this month's webinar is entitled The 800-Pound Retirement Gorilla, Long-Term Care. And yes, I came up with that title because I truly believe it is the retirement gorilla. Presented by Summit Financial Advisors. Today, I'll be presenting Glennel Jordann along with Kelley Tom and Elsa Segal. They are here on the calls today. We'll each be presenting a section. Just as a reminder, every month we do a new webinar on various topics. Sometimes we bring in guest speakers on topics that we think are relevant and will bring value to you. If you want to see what is upcoming or what we've done in the past, what I want to share with you is that you can visit our website, summitfinancialhawaii.com. You go to workshops tab, you'll be able to see our upcoming events. This is the one today. The one next month is on November 17th, which is a Tuesday, from 11:30 to 12:15 p.m. And it's called Providing for a Surviving Spouse in Retirement. And it talks about, as the title suggests, how to plan not just for your retirement, but if you're no longer here, making sure that your spouse is also taken care of in retirement. So now I'll go back to our screen. So long-term care is a very personal impact on a family and on retirement. So before we dive into the facts and the figures and the numbers, I want to take a moment and have Kelley share her personal story and her experience with long-term care in her family. And I'm going to stop the sharing for a second so you can just see Kelley talking. So go ahead, Kelley.
Hi, everybody. So maybe about 3 years ago, so my grandma was 93 years old, and she was slowly declining just because of old age. She was slowing down. And I was visiting one day, and she didn't talk as much, and she was walking slower. And my sister's boyfriend was like, "Hey, I think she had a stroke." And I was like, "What?" And we're talking to her, and sure enough, her speech was slurred. So we took her to the hospital, and they said she had a mini stroke and a mini heart attack, and we had no idea just because she was slowing down. So after her stay in the hospital for about a week, they said, "Oh, she needs to go to rehab." So she went to rehab, and they helped her try to get her speech back or learn how to speak again and learn how to walk. And the thing with rehab is once they say, "Hey, she's as much better as she can probably get, she needs to go." So after a few months, they said, "Okay, it's time for her to go." We were scrambling, like, okay, where can we send her? Because she still couldn't walk on her own. So she needed 24-hour care. But medical insurance and rehab weren't going to cover her anymore. So we had to get her somewhere. So luckily, we got her into Leahi. She was in a room with 4 other people. It was about $10,000 a month to pay for her long-term care. And every day she was there, she's been married with my grandpa over 50 years. And every day she was there, she was like, "When can I go home? When can I go home?" And even though she had slight dementia and she wasn't all there, she knew she wasn't at home. And so at that time, too, we were all taking turns bringing my grandpa every day so he could visit her. And so I said, "Hey, Dad, we got to get grandma home. That's where she's comfortable. It's easier for grandpa to see her. And my sister lives with them. It's just easier for them." And so we got her home. Luckily, she had a small long-term care plan. So that helped pay for someone to come during the day. But she needed 24-hour care. So they had to pay out of pocket for the remaining hours of the day. But to keep costs down, because they had assets in order to pay for her care. But the question mark was, what if she needed care for 10 years? Like, would they have enough assets for that? And then also, what if my grandpa needed care? And if it was for another 10 years, would they have enough? And so in order to kind of save assets, they did 18 hours a day. So 2-hour breaks between shifts, hoping that during those 2 hours, maybe she'll be okay. She wouldn't have to use the bathroom and maybe she'll be sleeping. But of course, things don't go on as planned. And so during those 2 hours when nobody was there, she would have to go to the bathroom. And she would forget she can't go on her own. And so sometimes she would get up and fall down. And so my grandpa, who's 95, 2 years older, would always have to help her, lift her up, dead weight, right? I mean, she was kind of weak, right? So she couldn't lift herself up. So he would have to strain and lift her up, help her to the bathroom, help her wipe, lift her up off the toilet. And it was really straining on him. And he would never say it. I mean, he loved her so much, he would do anything for her. But I could see as I visited, oh, how's things going? He's like, oh, my back is so sore. And it just took such a toll on him. And there were some days that the caregivers wouldn't come. And so then he had a 6-hour shift with her alone. So it was so hard on him. They have 2 kids, so my dad and my uncle. My uncle was still working, so he wasn't able to come during the day. My dad's retired, but he's kind of the old school style where he doesn't really want to, take care and wipe her, give her a bath and all that kind of stuff. And neither would my grandparents want to have their son taking care of them, wiping their behind and everything. So the plan always was to have somebody else help. And so she was at home for a good couple of years, my grandpa taking care of her, but eventually it just got so hard for him to have to take care, because one day she fell down and he couldn't lift her up off, 95-year-old trying to lift 115-pound person dead weight off the ground. So he had to scramble and go to the neighbor's house and see if anybody could help him. And it just took a toll on him. I'm so sorry. So during that time, we had caregivers come over and care for her. And it was actually nice because they actually looked after my grandpa as well. There's a few times he was out gardening and he fell down. And the caregivers are like, hey, where did he go? He's been gone for a while. So they went to look for him. And sure enough, he was on the ground and he couldn't get up on his own. So it was nice that they were also looking out for him. But it got to a point where it was just too much. And she needed, 24-hour care. So because they were private pay, they were able to choose where she could get her care. And so they chose a care home about a mile from his house near UH. And so it was nice. It was easy for him to visit her every day. So all of us grandkids, we all took turns dropping him off and picking him up to visit her. And so it was a nice experience for all of us because they had saved and they had planned for this. One, that they had long-term care insurance to help defray a good portion of the cost. And then also they had personal assets that they could use to help pay for her care, that the family were able to more manage the care than actually provide the care. But it was tough on my grandpa. Also for us, I mean, of course, whenever I was at our help, I guess I'm not really meant for the healthcare field, and I give everybody credit, but I didn't particularly enjoy, wiping my grandma's butt, but I did it. So it's a whole family. The whole family gets involved when it comes to long-term care. I just want to share our experience there. That's over to Glennel.
That was really nice. Thanks, Kelley. And I've heard this story probably 20 times, but it's a really good story. And it's the reality of what a lot of families go through. And luckily, your family was lucky enough not only to have insurance and have assets, but to have so much family support. That's really important too. So thank you. Just for the attendees that just came on, and for everybody, you should be able to find a chat box. So if you have any questions during the workshop, go ahead, type in your questions, and then Kelley and Elsa will be monitoring it, and they'll just interrupt me, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Okay. All right. So, and we will be done by 12:15. Okay. Just starting out, what is long-term care and what does it mean to need long-term care? I'm sure a lot of you probably think long-term care means nursing home, and it's not that simple. So what it is in the healthcare industry and in the insurance industry, what we say is it describes a variety of services which meet the medical, but more importantly, the non-medical needs of people with a chronic illness or disability that cannot care for themselves. And chronic illness is important because what chronic means is it's something that's continuous and that's not going to go away or get better. Now, when we say you need long-term care, what we're saying is that you cannot perform 2 out of 6 ADLs. And this is an acronym that's commonly used in the long-term care industry, and it stands for activities of daily living. And I'll go over what those ADLs are. Or let's say you can do all of the activities of daily living, but you have a cognitive impairment like Alzheimer's or dementia. A lot of people with Alzheimer's and dementia can actually do all the activities of daily living. However, they might walk out of the house and wander away. That actually happened to my father. The cops picked him up, I think, over a mile from his house. So it's one of those two, whether you can't perform 2 out of 6 activities of daily living or you have a cognitive impairment. That means that you need help with long-term care. Okay, so the activities of daily living, again, there's 6 of them. And not being able to do 2 of them, what we more mean is that you need assistance, you need supervision doing them. They are eating, bathing, so taking a shower, dressing every day, transferring, so getting in and out of bed, toileting and also maintaining continence, and then just walking or moving around. So as an example, my grandmother, she actually could do all of these most of the time. However, there is some times where her body just wouldn't enable her to completely dress on her own. Or if she took a shower, maybe a handful of times she fell down and she became a danger to herself. So at that point, even though she can do things a lot of the time on her own, and she still needs supervision for her safety. So she did qualify for needing long-term care at that time. So again, if you cannot do 2 of these, that means you need help with long-term care. There's also instrumental activities of daily living. And so while you might have somebody like a homemaker come over and help you with your activities of daily living, there's other things that they can help you with too. So housework, managing money. So interesting story. My grandma's always been very detailed about, she balances her checkbook. She's like very specific and deliberate about that kind of thing. Well, I just found out a few weeks ago that she wrote a check that was supposed to be for $2,000. It was for $200,000. And just little things like that. Now she's 95 years old. So now we're really having to step in and see what we can do, because that's a mistake that you don't want to see happen. Taking medication, preparing and cleaning up meals, shopping for groceries or other necessaries, using the telephone, caring for pets. My grandma's in a assisted living facility, but she does have a cat. And responding to emergency alerts, such as fire alarms. Sorry, my screen is, okay. So who needs care? Now, most people think, oh, long-term care is synonymous with being really old and in a nursing home. And that's not always the case. Generally, yes, the older you are, the more likely you will need long-term care. But also, women, on average, will need women longer than men and more frequently than men. And the reason for that is women statistically live longer. And I've heard men tell me many reasons why they think women live longer than them. But the reality is, when you're planning for long-term care, you want to make sure to think about both spouses. I hear this a lot where the husband will say, oh, my wife will take care of me. And I'm sure she will. But what if husband passes away first? Who's going to take care of wife? Disability. So getting into a car accident or having a stroke at a young age, that could actually create the need for long-term care at a younger time in life. Health status. So if you have like diabetes or high blood pressure, that could increase your need for long-term care. Because medical technology has improved so much over the past couple decades, that while we may be able to live longer with all these medications and advancements in medical technology, doesn't always mean the quality of our lives will be as well. And that actually exacerbates the need for long-term care. And then living arrangements. So if you're living alone, you're going to be much more likely to need to have paid services for long-term care. Now, what are the chances, what are the statistics of who needs long-term care? And unfortunately, it's more than likely that most of us on this call today will need long-term care at some point in our lives. So after the age of 65, there's a 70% chance that you will need some type of long-term care at some point in your life. 70%, so 7 out of 10 people will need it. Women, now how long do you need it? Women need care much longer time than men. On average, women need it for 3.7 years, while men need it for only 2.2 years. So what that means is, sure, 1/3 of people over 65 will never need long-term care, and they're the lucky ones that get to fall asleep and never wake up. However, 20% of people over the age of 65 will need long-term care for more than 5 years. So who will provide your care? Now, typically, people don't wake up and say, okay, I want to move to a nursing home now. Usually it starts, care is received by an unpaid caregiver. A lot of the time it's a spouse, maybe it's a child, a sibling, or a friend, an unpaid caregiver. And then maybe it becomes too much, like in Kelley's story, but this person stays at home. And then maybe you have a nurse or a home health aide, home health care aide come to the house and kind of supplements some of the time to take care of you. Another place you can receive it is an adult daycare center. I'm sure you've seen a lot of those around the island. And this is common if somebody's working. So if a child has to work during the day, or maybe the other spouse has to work, take you to the adult daycare center, pick you up at the end of the day. And then there's a variety of long-term care services. So there's assisted living facilities, and then within assisted living facilities, there's different levels of care. And then nursing home, kind of like your 24/7 type of care. So where can you receive it? Again, most people want to stay at home. Nobody wants to go to a nursing home. Most people would prefer to stay in their house. So they can get home care services, community services like an adult daycare I just spoke about, or facility-based services. So my grandmother stayed at home really as long as humanly possible. And just a couple of years ago, she went to an assisted living facility. And in the past couple of years, I've seen her move up in the levels of the assisted living facility. She's now in the 5th level, the highest level. And then if it really becomes intensive care, then it's kind of like 24/7 care. That's more of like nursing home. Okay, how much does it cost? It's no surprise that Hawaii has some of the most expensive long-term care facilities. And so what these costs come from Genworth. So every year Genworth does a study across the nation in every state. And if you want to look it up, you can just, if you Google Genworth cost of care, long-term care, it'll take you to this page. It's kind of like a calculator. And you put in your zip code, and then you can take a dialer, and you can dial up into the future on how much care will cost in the future, because the cost today isn't necessarily relevant to you, but it's the cost 20, maybe 30 years from now that we want to be aware of. So today, the cost of home care services can on average are around $5,000 per month, but in 30 years, we're looking at around $12,000 a month. If we go down to nursing home care, these are some of the numbers Kelley was talking about. Her grandma was paying $10,000. So right now a semi-private room is about $11,000 and a private room is $13,000. But if we look out 30 years from now, now we're looking at $30,000 a month just for long-term care. And then if you look at the average amount of time you're in long-term care, you can see that the cost can become extremely large and can easily eat into your assets. That's why it's so important to start planning early. Now we're going to turn it over to Elsa. She's going to talk to you guys about how to pay for long-term care, the various ways to pay for it. So Elsa, you go ahead and share your screen. And you're on mute right now.
Hi, everybody. Let me share my screen here. So just who pays for long-term care? This Medicare card reminds me of a client who was helping her 65-year-old father go through some mail, and then she found a cancellation notice for his long-term care policy and asked him why he stopped paying. And he said, because I have Medicare now and I don't need it. This is such a common myth. In the 12 years we've been doing this, I've heard this so many times. Medicare actually does cover some, but not all. Some skilled nursing home care and rehab, but under very tight restrictions. You have to have stayed in a hospital for 3 days first, and then be discharged directly to a nursing facility or rehab. Medicare does not pay for custodial care. It will cover the first 20 days completely, and then the next 80 days, it will cover all but the deductible. And then after 100 days, it doesn't cover anything. You're 100% responsible for day 101 and beyond. When I say skilled care, I'm talking about someone who has the licenses to administer injections, IV therapy, catheter care, and then rehab is like occupational therapy or physical therapy or speech or cognitive rehabilitation. So again, Medicare covers the first 100 days if and only if the patient is receiving skilled care. The patient must have a qualifying stay of at least 3 days, and the patient must enter a nursing home within 30 days of hospital discharge. So it's very, very restricted. Another program that pays for long-term care is called Medicaid, and that's a federally funded program. And this is where a recipient must have no more than $2,000 of countable assets. So if you're married or your husband and wife can keep the house, one house, and keep one car. And you're allowed to keep half of the countable assets, up to $126,000, and allowed to keep the first $3,000 of monthly income. Anything over the monthly allowance must be paid directly to the nursing home. And these are general figures, but it varies state to state. This is another popular one. I've heard this so many times, people trying to hide their assets so they can qualify for Medicaid. That is strictly prohibited. Yes, you can transfer your assets, but to do that just to qualify for Medicaid is not allowed. Any transfers made to family members after 2006 are subject to a 5-year look-back period. And transfers must be made 5 years prior to becoming eligible for Medicaid. Do we have a question? No questions. Okay. So moving forward, this slide talks about the penalty. So let's just say, for example, you apply for Medicaid, and then 4 years ago you sold your home to your son for $450,000. And during the Medicaid interview, they discovered that the fair market value of your home was actually $550,000. But because the cost of a nursing home, like Glennel said, is around $10,000, the penalty period of ineligibility will be 10 months. So that's 100,000 divided by 10,000 equals 10 months. So in which you have to spend down to that $2,000 countable assets to be approved for Medicaid.
There's a question, and I'll actually answer it real fast. I'm sure some other people were wondering. The question is, are trusts counted as assets? And the answer is yes. If you have a revocable living trust, anything inside of a revocable living trust is considered still yours. And as long as it's yours, it's your asset and it is counted. If you wanted to completely get stuff out of your name, then you're looking at different types of trusts, which is what most people don't have. But we can talk more about that offline too. Go Go ahead, Elsa.
Sure. Okay, so moving on, a lot of people rely on family members to provide care. But as you can see by my little emojis, family members may not have the expertise or skills to maybe administer shots or do catheter care or even CPR. The caregiver may not have proper facilities like handlebars, wheelchair ramps, or safe showers. And of course, this arrangement can cause strain on existing relationships and potentially the caregiver's quality of life. Or even worse, the caregiver might be too occupied with season 3 of Real Housewives or some crazy reality show. I've seen that happen. So how will you pay for long-term care? There are several ways you can self-insure. And if you choose to go this route, make sure that the money you're planning to spend for long-term care is not what your spouse needs to live off. In fact, self-insuring is kind of like the default for a lot of people because they haven't planned for it. And that, of course, has its consequences. And then family, are they going to be able to? Will it impede on their quality of life and their ability to support their family? And then, of course, there's government programs. But do you really want to give away all your assets just to qualify for Medicaid? Are the Medicaid facilities going to be up to par with your standards and have the amenities you're looking for? Is it going to be a comfortable place for families to visit? Are you going to be okay with living with roommates? So those are the things to consider. Another really popular way is transferring that risk to insurance companies. It has its advantages and disadvantages as well, which Kelley will go over. Right now in Hawaii, this is based on Genworth's study, it costs about $153,300 annually, or about $420 a day, and this is based on Honolulu numbers. So top reasons why people get long-term care insurance, and it's so you don't dip into your retirement funds to cover the cost of care or have to force sell assets just to pay for it. And a lot of times your premium can be partially or completely deductible. Obviously, preserving dignity, maintaining your standard of living and independence, and then to keep from being a burden on your family. And then staying at home where you know where the remote is, where the bathroom is, and where you're most comfortable. And then really leaving a legacy of not just assets, but good memories with your family. This slide kind of reminds me of what my mom went through. It was 1993 when my grandfather was diagnosed with dementia also, and then he started having incontinence issues. My mom was 38, I was 15, my sister was 14. To think now I'm kind of around her age, I'm early 40s, now with an 8-year-old and 16-year-old, but my mom came home from a long day of work and would clean up after grandma, make dinner for us, feed him, and then deal with his temper tantrums. And then on top of that, 2 teenage daughters. So it was a challenge for sure. It became too difficult to keep him supervised 24/7 and too stressful for the family that we ultimately had to send him to the Philippines because we couldn't afford the care here in Hawaii. So this pie chart just kind of just shows if 27% say it's not difficult, then the 73% thinks that caregiving is little to extremely difficult. So that's something to consider for your family or those that you intend to have take care of you. I think that concludes my part. I will transfer it over to Kelley.
Thanks, Elsa. Okay, so now most people say, I think my preferred option is to transfer the risk and have the insurance company pay for my long-term care. And so I'm going to be talking about the 3 main options. There's many, but these are the main ones I'm going to be talking about. And of course, it's all specific to your individual situations. We can always talk offline about the best option for you. So the 3 are, first is traditional long-term care, life insurance, or asset-based long-term care. So traditional long-term care insurance, this is the first one that came about. You get a benefit amount, so you can choose what you want. Let's say you say, okay, cost of care today is $10,000, but I have pension and I have Social Security, so that can help pay for my care. So the gap is about $6,000. So then you can say, okay, I want my benefit to pay out $6,000 a month. So you go with the average of 3 years. And then you can add an inflation rider on it. So because you think, okay, today I'm in my 60s, but what if I need care when I'm in my 80s? How much will care cost then? And so a good thing to add on is inflation, where your benefits will increase every year. The whole point to keep up with the cost of care. And then the last piece you choose is your elimination period. This is like a deductible, how many days you need to pay out of pocket before the policy will kick in. And there's always add-ons you can add. One is shared care, so if you're married, a special bucket where you and your spouse can share extra funds in it. So let's go with an example. So let's say you choose $6,000 a month of benefits. And so the way they calculate is $6,000 a month times 12 months in a year times 3 years of how long you want the money to last, right? So your total pool of money is $216,000. So that's how much you have to use for long-term care whenever you want to. Now, let's say when you first need care, maybe you only need a couple hours a day of care. Maybe family's able to help a little bit after work. And so let's say you only need to pay out, your care only costs $3,000 a month to have somebody come to the house. Then your money, your $216,000 will last longer than the 3 years. So that's just how they calculate the total pool of money available to you. As an example, so 20 years later with the 3% inflation, then your total pool of money will be $390,000, which comes out to about $10,000 a month. The risk with traditional long-term care, and which has happened in the past, is that premiums can increase. And so many insurance companies that issue these policies many years ago, they had to increase premiums because they had no idea how much people would go on claim. And so because of that, they had to raise premiums. And when they do, they typically give options. Either you pay the increased premium, or you can lower your benefit amount, lower how long it lasts, lower the inflation. So there's options, but it's not a good situation, right? If you're on a fixed income or you only plan for a certain amount, that they do have that option to raise premium. So let's do an example. Let's say Marilyn here, she is 60. She needs long-term care to protect her assets and wants to remain independent. She doesn't want to get a traditional long-term care policy like what we just talked about for the risk of her premiums increasing. So wants to get something. One option is what's called a life insurance with a long-term care rider. So what this is, it's a life insurance policy. So it pays out upon her passing, but it also pays out if she needs long-term care. And so it's a way to have access to that money sooner. So let's say, for example, she said, okay, I'm going to get a $300,000 policy. Many different insurance companies give out different payouts. Typically, it's about 4% a month for the calculation. And so 4% of $300,000 is $12,000 a month. And so this insurance company, this insurance policy would pay out $12,000 a month, a maximum of up to $12,000 a month for long-term care should she qualify. So if she used the maximum $12,000 a month, it will last for 25 months. Let's say again, she doesn't need full care, $6,000 a month. Then that money will last 50 months. Let's say she uses up to, maybe she uses $100,000 and then she passes away. $200,000 is left in the policy. That's what goes to beneficiaries. So many people like this one because somebody gets the money, whether it's her for her long-term care or her beneficiary. Going back to the traditional long-term care that we first talked about, that one is considered a use it or lose it, just like your home insurance, car insurance. You pay a premium for that coverage, but if you never use it, then it just goes to the insurance company. There's no refund for you.
Yeah, Kelley, we had a question, and that was, what happens if you die before using any benefits? So just,
for this one?
I think it was the first one for both of them.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, so unless you added a rider on the first one, sometimes you can add a rider, return a premium, then you get money back. But most times that's not the case. So then that goes to your insurance company. This one, life insurance with long-term care rider, there's no inflation option. So if it's $12,000 a month for long-term care benefits today, it's $12,000 a month, 20 years from now. So it's something to keep in mind and plan for. should you need care down the road. Let's look at another example. Here is Elvis, a 60-year-old retired Elvis impersonator in Vegas. He wants to receive long-term care at home with his 2 dogs. He doesn't want to spend down his money to pay for care. He prefers to leave his money behind to his 2 kids and grandchildren. But he also doesn't want to pay premiums every year like traditional long-term care or the life insurance. And he has $100,000 set aside in his bank for long-term care. What can he do? Well, he can leverage that $100,000 in a long-term care policy called asset-based long-term care. So how it works is he pays a single premium, so he uses that $100,000 to shift it to an asset-based long-term care policy, depending on his age and his health, and depending on the insurance company's plan, they leverage that money. And so in this example, this is one insurance company that we commonly use. This one, so this example is a 60-year-old male I ran the quote for, and I added a 5% compound option, so the benefits increased by 5% a year. By the time he's 80, his benefits will have grown to $857,000 for long-term care. So how nice, right? The money grew by 8 times the amount of what he put in. And this type of plan, there's also a death benefit. So say he passes away and he never needs care, there's a death benefit. This example, he'll get back $100,000. Let's say 10 years from now, he's like, hey, I want to just enjoy the money and just take a trip around the world. There's a return of premium, so he can get back his $100,000. But if he needs money for long-term care, depending on the age, then he gets more money for long-term care. And again, with all of these plans, the qualifications are different. First is your age. So the pricing depends on how old you are. The younger, the cheaper. And then second is how your health is. And different companies have different underwriting. Sometimes they just look at your medical records. They don't need your blood and urine. Sometimes they just ask knockout questions. If you can say no to all these knockout questions, you qualify. And they're typically, are you using a walker? Are you currently in a daycare? Have you had a stroke or heart attack? So stuff like that. And then sometimes it's full underwriting where they take your blood and urine. They look at everything. It all depends. And then sometimes it's a phone interview. And it's really easy. It's more, who's the president? Recite back these 10 items. And they just want to make sure you don't already have dementia. With all of these plans, you can, well, most of the plans, I would say, depending on, most of them nowadays, you can choose where you want the care, whether it's at home, daycare, nursing home, or if you have to graduate as time goes on. But they're very flexible. And again, if you need help, that's where we come in to help you figure out, okay, based on how you envision your care, where you want to receive your care, then we can help find the best one for you. How your health is, then we can help find the best one for you. Any other questions come through?
No, but I guess a general question for somebody that maybe is hearing this for the first time might ask is, which one is better?
Yeah, exactly. It depends on your individual situation. They all have their pros and cons. And so that's something we would have to sit down and see what's most important. You know, say you don't have any kids, then the life insurance option might not be as important, right? Leaving money to somebody. So it all depends. Let's recap. So myth, most long-term care is provided at home. When in fact, we know, right? Nursing home. Where in fact, most long-term care is provided at home, where everyone's most comfortable, right? Myth, Medicare, health insurance, and disability insurance pays for long-term care. No, only long-term care insurance pays for long-term care expenses. Another myth, you can immediately qualify for Medicaid to pay for long-term care assets by transferring assets to family. Again, the truth is there's a 5-year look-back period to qualify for Medicaid. And then myths, family history, income, and age are all primary factors in calculating long-term care premiums. The reality is age is a primary factor in calculating long-term care insurance premiums. And everybody asks me, oh, when should I get it? I mean, really, the sooner the better, because you never know how things can change, and maybe you may not qualify in the future. So the sooner you look at it, the better. So make a plan. Talk with your family, especially yourself, of how each of you wants to receive your care, where you want to receive your care. If you guys decide you want to self-insure, make sure that the money set aside, as Elsa mentioned, is not going to be used for the other spouse's living expenses, right? Because the other spouse is still going to have to pay the homeowner's insurance and the electricity, water, food, everything else that comes with that spouse living at that home. If you want to transfer the rest to an insurance company, again, review options now while age and health is in your favor. And depending on the type of plan is how the underwriting is going to be done. And all long-term care insurance benefits are tax-free for qualified long-term care expenses. So that's huge. I mean, it's pretty much saying that the government wants people to save on their own, and so that's why they're giving us this tax-free. They're not taxing this money out of long-term care plans because they want people to plan for their future. Again, our next workshop is next month. We're going to be sending out an email just like we did for this one of how to protect for your spouse. And it's on our website right now if you want more information. Thank you everyone for joining. Any other questions before we end the call? Oh, good, we finished right on time.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions. For the attendees, I set up a, I'm not sure if it's gonna work, but I set up a.
I have a question coming in from text message. I guess they are watching this. Can you use retirement assets for any of the policies you discussed?
Oh, thank you for that question. Yes, with asset-based, yes, with some of them you can, but it's in a way where you have internally, the insurance company designs it where it's coming out as a premium. So you're paying taxes on that money that goes into the plan, and eventually it does come out tax-free, but you still have to pay tax on the retirement assets. So there's no way around that. But companies have a way to structure, or instead of, let's say you have $200,000 in an IRA account that's taxable, right? Instead of just putting that $200,000 chunk into a retirement account and adding $200,000 of income to your taxes, they have it a way of where you can spread it out over, say, 20 years, so that at least each year your taxable burden is not huge. You can spread it out, but it can still be used for long-term care.
And can you do a joint policy with husband and wife?
Yes. With some of these policies you can. It all depends on the policy, but yes.
Okay.
And sometimes too there's discounts if husband and wife sign up as well.
All righty, thank you very much. I believe when you log out of this meeting, there's a couple of poll questions. If there's a topic you'd really like us to talk about, one of those questions is one of those topics, please let us know. We're always looking for new ideas. And then if you'd like to set up a time to speak to one of us directly about these topics, that was another question. Thank you guys so much for coming. We try to make these short and sweet because we know we all have things to do, and we want to keep it interesting. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Ahui. Bye. Aloha.